ladies and gentlemen. To those of you who decided to join us and have joined us, it seems to me that we are on the journey to the end of the story today. My name is John O'Keefe, Mr. O'Keefe, Mr. O to those of you who have been representing the Gwyn Oaks crew. If anybody else begins to subscribe, welcome. One thing that I want to make a note of before we even begin, to those of you who are watching live, welcome. You are the first with us to be able to finish it with us as a team. Secondly, I'm going to let you know that there are 4 options for the next book that is going to be offered to you on our e-class in Gwyn Oaks. You can go to Mr. O's announcements and you will see a very clear statement that says, what book should we read next? There are 4 choices, all of which I love, and all of which I would say are grand benefits, even if you have read them before. But that's not why we're here, is it? By the way, did you hear who's with us again today? He got silent. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It is time. Night Divided closes today. I'm so excited. There is nothing like finishing a book. I will tell you that if you watched yesterday's and tried to do the measurement of stuff, there is very little left for us to do. Yesterday, in our exciting conclusion of yesterday's immense excitement, if I am not mistaken, we had a particular soldier and his family. We had a man running up to find out who the footsteps in the welcome building were. We found out that there was a best friend and her family. We found out that they were, as a team, running to the tunnel. Okay, I can't. I'm sorry. I can't stop. I want to keep elongating this, but it's time to read. I'm going to read the last part where it says, flashlights were already showing in the garden patch. It wouldn't take the Grenzers long to follow us inside. They were coming. Chapter 46. Freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., American Civil Rights Activist, 1963. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Once we were close enough to see him. Fritz motioned that the gap was open and to hurry. Women and children were to go through first, which was fine by me, but Anna didn't seem to be adjusting as well to the closed-in tunnel. I took her clammy hand and half-dragged her to the very end, then whispered that everything would be all right, even if I wasn't convinced of that yet. Frau Mueller was there too, and Fritz told her to lie on her stomach and crawl through the low opening. She thrust her baby into my arms while we went through. I hadn't expected that and took her child somewhat clumsily. The baby reacted to the awkward change of position and began fussing in my arms. I bounced him and tried to coo at him, but he must have sensed my own anxiety and started crying even louder. "Stop him," Fritz hissed, but I didn't know how. I was certain that somehow this baby could sense the panic inside me, and so everything I tried only made him more upset. Then, without even asking, Anna took the baby from me and cradled him in her arms as comfortably as his own mother had. He instantly quieted down until Frau Mueller said that she was through, and then Anna crouched down to pass the baby through the opening into her hands. Anna had saved the moment, but, just as important, the baby had forced her to gather her own courage enough to go through the gap, an opening so small that it didn't look like it should be able to accommodate her body, much less any of the rest of us. Fritz told Mama to go next, and Anna's mother would be the next after that. I got in place for my turn and watched my mother easily slide through the gap. I heard her brief reunion with my father and could only imagine what it must have taken for her to push away from him as he begged her to keep running to the end. Anna's mother went next, but she too was close to one edge and got stuck. She panicked and began squirming and kicking, trying to roll over onto her back. In the process, she kicked out and her foot struck the wall of dirt. Instantly, a large chunk crashed down on her upper legs. She gave a cry, though I didn't think she was seriously hurt. "Give me your hands," my father said. Just like that, Anna's mother was pulled through. "I don't like this," Fritz said, feeling the wall above the collapsed chunk. "This whole thing is going to come down. Hurry, Gerda. It's your turn now." I went down to my stomach and put my cheek against the cold ground. With my hands in front of me, I clawed at the dirt, wiggling forward like a worm or a snake. Dirt crumbled down onto my back, more of it than I liked. Fritz was right. This wall was going to come down, and maybe the rest of the tunnel with it. Papa grabbed my hands when I was halfway through and yanked me forward just as he had done for Anna's mother. Once on the other side, I was immediately caught in my father's tear-stained embrace. Even through the dirt and the sweat, he smelled to me just as he had when I was young. Over the last 4 years, I had tried so many times to recreate in my mind that combination of strong cheese and stronger coffee, just to hold on to his memory. But now everything about him rushed back at me, as if we had never been separated at all. It was too dark to see much of his face, but I did see a tender smile and the whites of his eyes when he said, "Run, Gerda, go." Did you notice, and I know you hate me stopping right now, but did you notice how that paragraph, we were in a moment of absolute anxiety, absolute tension, and then all of a sudden she stopped for this slow-mo moment of being able to make sure that we got all of that little small moment in, all of the smells, all of the feeling, all of the expression. It was absolutely wonderful. Sorry. But I wouldn't leave the tunnel without Fritz. Not after everything that he and I had been through together. Anna's father came through next and needed no urging to run past us toward his family. Then a voice from far on the eastern end shouted, "Whoever is in this tunnel, you are ordered to stop." I didn't need to see them. I already knew the Grenzers were there. Shots fired into the tunnel. They echoed so loud that even from this end, it rang in my ears. Officer Mueller came through after that, and when his eyes met mine, I wanted to hurt him. Why had he come through next? Where was Fritz? I nearly screamed with terror. I fell to my knees to slide back to the other side of the gap. If he was injured, I could still drag him through, and if he was worse than injured, I couldn't even think about that. Papa grabbed my arms and pulled me back to my feet. I started to protest, but he wrapped his arms around me, put a hand over my mouth, and hushed me. "They know Fritz is there," he whispered. "They don't have to know you're here too." He tried to make me run again, but I wormed free and went back to my knees. Where was Fritz? Then I saw his head poke through. He was alive, but wasn't wiggling through as quickly as he should have. Working together, Papa and Officer Mueller pulled him through. "I'm shot," he said through clenched teeth. "A bullet got my leg." Papa helped him to his feet and then motioned for me to come over. "Get him out of this tunnel," Papa said. "Bear his weight." "I will." I wasn't sure how, but I would get him out. Fritz wrapped one arm around me and used the other to brace himself through the tunnel. He couldn't use his injured leg at all, and whenever we moved too fast or it bumped against a rock, he grunted with pain and clutched my shoulder so tight that we both nearly collapsed. Still, we kept going forward. I had the strength to support him, but not the height. And he had to lean over too far. Papa would have done better. Where was he? What about Mueller? What were they waiting for? After several meters more, gunfire echoed into the tunnel. With a strange cracking sound, the bridge between our two tunnels collapsed. That's what Papa was doing then. Shots still rang, but they wouldn't pass through the thick dirt. The Grenzers were trapped behind us, but a lot of tunnel remained ahead. In the dim light, I could see where Papa had put in supports to hold up the dirt roof, but they weren't as strong as Fritz's bricks, and dirt rained down on us, some of it in large chunks that signaled a bigger collapse was coming. Suddenly, several meters ahead, shovels pounded into the ground. Their crunch and plunking sounds were all too familiar to me now. Maybe we'd left officers behind in the tunnel, but more of them were in the death strip directly above us. The layers of dirt to the surface weren't nearly thick enough to hold them out for very long. I wondered where the outer wall was. When we would pass beneath it, wherever it was, I knew we hadn't crossed it yet. Not with the length of tunnel still remaining. Ah! Fritz's leg bumped into some protruding rock, and his hand pinched my shoulder so tight that I wanted to cry out too. I'm sorry, I mumbled. I'm slowing you down. Fritz leaned heavier on me and swayed as if he was dizzy. Leave me here. Just leave me here. That's the dumbest idea you have ever had, I told him. Stay with me, Fritz. We're going to make it. Then Papa and Officer Mueller ran up behind us. Papa picked up Fritz in his arms, drawing strength I never imagined he had to run with a body nearly as large as his own. And Mueller grabbed my hand to pull me along with him. I yanked it free and dug my feet into the ground. Maybe he was on our side, but just barely. My family had taken all the risks to get us this far, while he had stayed in the safe zone just in case things turned bad. I didn't want his help now, and I certainly didn't need it. But Mueller didn't seem to care. He grabbed my arm again, and this time he gripped me with no forgiveness. I would run at his side or get dragged behind him whether I liked it or not. Papa and Fritz weren't far ahead of us, but they rounded a short bend out of our sight, and I held my breath. Mueller probably didn't think of himself as a Grenzer anymore, but I still did. Then, right above our heads, one of the holes being dug crashed through from the surface. Dirt cascaded over us, and a large rock fell at my feet, momentarily forcing Mueller and me back. I looked up, expecting to see starlight, but I saw only shadows of several Grenzers standing over the hole. There were foul curses and orders being shouted to widen the hole, but Mueller steered me around the rock so that we could keep running. Then a hand reached down into the tunnel with a gun at the end of it. It aimed directly at me, so that even in this dim light I thought I could see directly down the barrel of the gun. I froze, as if every part of me had just turned to ice. All that remained was for someone to order him to fire. And that's where we end today. I'm just kidding. There is no way that I'm ending today. Oh my gosh. Chapter 47. All free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin. I take pride in saying, Ich bin ein Berliner. John F. Kennedy, U.S. President, 1963. Mueller gave me a hard shove, forcing me toward the bend, then turned back and reached for the gun. Evidently, hoping to grab it before any damage was done, I rounded the bend in time to hear the echoes of gunshots inside the tunnel and a body's collapse onto the ground. I wanted to keep running. I couldn't be more than a minute away from safety, but I also couldn't ignore that Mueller had just saved my life. Putting himself between the gun and me, I had to help him. I had to help Mueller. I crept back to the bend. The hand with the gun was gone, but shovels were digging back into the dirt, widening the hole. Mueller was on the ground directly below them. There was enough moonlight now that I could see the blood on his chest. Only a few nights ago, I had grabbed a heavy door and dragged it beneath the eyes of the watchtower. This wasn't much different. The same eyes were above me now, and I had escaped their guns once before. I pried my arms beneath Mueller's shoulders and locked my hands together across his chest. I felt his blood there, warm, sticky, and it took all my courage to stay with him. Then I heaved a deep breath and dragged him, so slowly that I wasn't sure if I was moving at all. Dirt rained down over us as the gap widened. It wouldn't be much longer before it was wide enough for the entire body to fit through, or before they weakened the roof and collapsed the tunnel. I wasn't sure which was going to happen or which would be worse. Mueller mumbled something to me about letting him go, but I ignored him and kept dragging. I'm sorry, I told him as we went. I wouldn't trust you, and I'm sorry about that. You saved my life. Get my wife to freedom, he mumbled. My son. He was heavier than the door, but I knew I was strong enough. We rounded the bend with his boots dragging along the tunnel floor, slowing me down. Worse still was that Mueller's body was steadily becoming heavier. Both his arms had fallen into the dirt and his head was slumped off to one side. I couldn't explain why. It just was. Gerda, set him down. Set him down. I felt my father's hand on my shoulder and looked up to face him. I can't. He's hurt. Papa pressed between me and Officer Mueller, removing my arms and gently laying him on the ground. He's not hurting anymore. Oh. I backed against the dirt while my father felt for a pulse at the base of Mueller's neck. You know that spot, like right here? You can touch it right now. Feel how your heart's beating right there. Like, find that little spot, that spot, go right over here. He's looking for that. He's looking for that pulse in his neck. I backed against the dirt while my father felt for a pulse at the base of Mueller's neck. He turned to me and shook his head. I was wrong about him. That was all I could say, and it didn't seem like nearly enough. Papa took my hand. Let's go, Gerda. I started to protest, but we heard orders above ground for a man to be lowered into the tunnel. Wordlessly, I let my father lead me away. The officer who had dropped into the tunnel behind us ordered us to halt, but by that time we were too far away for his gun to be fired at the right angle. And then, suddenly, he stopped calling for us, and I knew why. Just ahead of us, in the dirt, Papa had stuck the striped flag of West Germany as a place marker. After 3 more steps, we passed beneath the Berlin Wall. We might not be out of the tunnel, but we were in the West. We were in the West. I could scarcely believe it. I felt like I was moving in a dream, one I hoped would never end. Only a few meters ahead, I saw the end of the tunnel. I first mistook the dim light for sunrise and then realized it was near a nearby streetlight, a single star in a sea of darkness. Metaphor. Single star in a sea of darkness. I emerged from the tunnel in a small graveyard, blocked from the watchtower's view by the caretaker's shop, and from a hole disguised as a grave. I rose up to greet the coming morning. The West German soldiers were here with their weapons drawn, making it clear that the Grenzers had missed their chance at us. They would not be allowed to step even a single toe into this half of the city. I filled my lungs with the fresh air, too exhausted to even sit down. Papa squeezed my shoulder and then went over to talk to Frau Mueller. I couldn't hear what they said, but I did see her tears as she cradled her baby close to her. Anna's parents went over to help comfort her. From there, my eyes drifted to the Berlin Wall, the side of it that we had never seen before in the East. It was covered in graffiti and signs protesting its very existence. The sight of it startled me, that people would dare to express themselves so boldly, so publicly. Beside me, Dominic leaned his elbow on my shoulder. There's a lot more that you'll have to get used to on this side, he said. I look forward to it, I mumbled, then jabbed him in the side. The first time I jabbed him in 4 years. I'd been able to tease him back. First time. Mama hugged me, and then we all walked over to Fritz, who was being cared for by one of the West German officers. The smile on his face was so wide that nobody would have ever suspected an injury by a bullet to his leg. You did the impossible, Mama said, cradling each of our faces with her hands at one at a time. I could only sit back and hope. But you 3 children made it happen. I hugged Anna next. I can't believe you came, I said to her. You made me think about Peter, about what he would have wanted us to do. Then her smile fell. But I'm sorry about one thing. I promised you that I wouldn't tell anyone about the tunnel until tomorrow. I didn't even get halfway home before I knew I'd be breaking that promise with my parents. I only hugged her even tighter. You can break those kinds of promises to me anytime you want. My father was there to hug me last of all. I had never, ever seen him weep before, but now his tears flowed freely, and he smiled through them. He held me back so he could look at me better and brushed his hands over my hair and across my shoulders. I knew how I must have looked, filthy, bone-tired, and even blood-stained, but he only gazed at me like he might look up upon an angel. My precious daughter, he said, so brave, so bold. Officer Mueller's family, they're part of our family now. He looked at all of us, then back to me. How should we celebrate our freedom? I smiled back at him. Maybe we could all sleep for a few hours, I said. And then I thought that we'd go to the market together to get something to eat. He chuckled. And what might you want from the market? A banana. I'd been planning to ask for one since the first day of digging. He hugged me again. You shall have one today. Only a few short hours later, I felt sunlight on my face. The sun never rises in the west. But that day, it did. For me and for my family, the long, dark night was over. I'm not going to be able to say this right. To those of you, when you learn German, come back to me. There are only a few words on this last page. Geschichte wiederholt sich. History repeats itself. German proverb. Before I read the elements, I need to take a deep breath, and I need to feel what the end of this book feels like. I've been seeing so many things coming up on the side over here, and thank you. I hope that hasn't distracted you, and it's a glory to see so much participation. Sorry, I couldn't help it. They made it. They made it. Everybody except for Mueller. It's interesting how he cost his own life for the freedom of others when he was the one who was most afraid or most fearful. I was most frightened of at the beginning of this book. I want to thank you for being here for the end of Night Divided. I am going to read the acknowledgments because I think that might be a really important thing for us to touch base on, and I always believe in reading everything that a book has to offer us. But before we do, please, 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 don't forget to be a voice in the next book that we read. I have chosen 4 books, all of which I want to read, all of which probably will be read, and I'll keep offering them as options. But I don't want you to leave our family. Don't leave the 3:30 Club. Don't leave our reading time. This is a part of this away time that I feel that we can truly connect with and to discuss and to participate in. So to you who are here live, to you who are going to be here later, I want to ask for you to join us. The way you do that is go on to eClass, go on to Mr. O's page, and right at the top of the announcements, click on the survey, watch each trailer. And I did the best for the trailers. The trailers are pretty good. They have kind of soft, sweet music. Don't let that affect the point that the trailers are giving you. I want you to take the time to kind of pay attention to that. So without further ado, I want to read the last bits that Jennifer Nielsen, who wrote A Night Divided, stated. These are her acknowledgments. You do know to acknowledge somebody is to give credit. So to the 5 who are watching live, I'm acknowledging you right now. I'm looking at you live right now on this beautiful Friday afternoon. Acknowledgments. There was nothing logical about my decision to write this book. The timing was too tight. I was already contracted for a different trilogy. And, as was pointed out to me more than once, I wasn't a historical writer. But Gerda was insistent, constantly interrupting my thoughts the way that I'm sure she often pestered her family. Eventually, I gave in and wrote the first few words, which led to a story that refused to let me go. Although I didn't know if I could do Gerda justice, I was determined to try. This could not have been written without the support of my family. While I holed up in a quiet room to complete this project, she's got a lot of time now, I bet. They assured me that clean laundry was a bonus rather than a necessity, and that they were perfectly good cooks, or better, as it turned out. They are a finer family than I deserve. Most of all, I am grateful to my husband, Jeff, who is unfailing good to me. unfailingly good to me. I cannot imagine a day without him. Warmest thanks to those who put input and advice came at the most crucial of times, especially my agent of awesomeness, Amy Joan Packett, and my friends and fellow authors, Joanne Levy and Lisa McMahon. I am eternally grateful to the Scholastic family. It is their combined expertise and brilliance that sends this book out into the world. Speaking of brilliance, thanks also to my editor, Lisa Sandel. It is the highest privilege to work with her, and with every book, I continue to learn from her wisdom. If anyone wants a laugh, ask her what else she was doing the day this project went into acquisitions. Finally, my thanks to Dr. Christina Cuevas Wolf, manager of the collections department at the Vend Museum in Culver City, California. With her help and expertise, I was able to see firsthand the objects and images of Cold War East Germany, of daily life behind the wall, and the invasive reach of the Stasi into its citizens' lives. I learned so much more there than I could have ever anticipated. Any factual errors in these pages are all mine. Above all, with this book, I send all my respect and honor to anybody in Germany. Ich bin ein Berliner. Well, I only have a few more words left and then we'll have to say goodnight. About the author, Jennifer Nielsen is an acclaimed author of the New York Times and USA Today best-selling Ascendance trilogy, The False Prince, The Runaway King, and The Shadow Throne, as well as Mark of the Thief. Jennifer also wrote Behind Enemy Lines, the 6th book in the Infinity Ring series, and The Underworld Chronicles, a humorous middle-grade fantasy series. She collects old books, loves good theater, and thinks that a quiet afternoon in the mountains makes for a nearly perfect moment. She lives in northern Utah with her husband, their 3 children, and a perpetually muddy dog. You can visit her at www.jennnielsen.com. I just wish there was more. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, it is Friday afternoon. It's the end of another great novel. I love putting a new novel onto my shelf of books read. And that means I've got another book pile that's about this big next to my bed. And I get to take the one that's off the top. But actually, there are 4 on the top of this one because you need to go vote. Please be a voice on what we start next on Monday. And please come back and join us. Without further ado, as always, be safe, be wonderful, be a kid, go out and live your life, feel the sun, and get out of here. I love you very much. Adios.